Joining me now are co-hosts of Pod Save America, the hit podcast, Jon Favreau and Tommy Vitor, together with Jon Lovett, who's not here this evening. They are the authors of a new book. It is called Democracy or Else: How to Save Democracy in 10 Easy Steps. Guys, thank you for being here. You could bake brownies in 10 easy steps, or you could save democracy. It's
either or.
It's your choice. Before we get to the book, which is essential reading in this particular moment, I do want to talk about, you guys are astute observers of politics. You understand the strategy that goes behind the scenes in terms of prepping presidents or leaders for important moments. And I do wonder, as we barrel towards this debate on Thursday, when you think about the sort of essential question that Biden is faced with, how much to run on his own record, how much to highlight what he's done versus how much to try and put Trump on defense. What do you think the breakdown is, and how do you think of it strategically, Jon?
I think that the president has to frame his accomplishments as down payments on what he wants to continue to do for the next 4 years. I mean, I know the slogan they've been using is finish the job.
Yeah.
I think that's smart because, if people aren't feeling the effects of the legislation that he's passed yet, you don't want to seem like you're talking past people.
Yeah.
But I think as quickly as he can pivot to the choice in the election, right? So it's like, insulin's $35 now for seniors. I wanted to make it $35 for everyone. Republicans blocked it. Donald Trump's against it. If you give me another 4 years, I'll make it $35 for everyone. If you give Donald Trump another 4 years, he's going to take away your health care.
Do you think, as a practical matter, Tommy, it's possible to really give those details in the format of a debate, which I think we all agree is like a mud wrestling match that we've decided serves some utility in American politics? Maybe it does. The Biden campaign clearly thinks it does because they wanted this debate. And I just wonder really, as a matter of strategy, does he have to choose? Can he do both, as Jon is suggesting?
I mean, I think what Jon's getting at is the mistake is making this a referendum about your accomplishments and getting defensive and sounding defensive. And I think with a 2-minute answer, when Trump's mic is ostensibly muted, we don't know if Jake Tapper is going to hog tie him and silence him if he starts screaming.
I'm going to guess no. When I hear the phrase Jake Tapper and hog tie, they don't go together.
Well, you don't know Jake the way I know Jake.
Yeah, fair enough.
Hogs in our day. So I think you can get out, the first half is like, here's what I've done, here's what I'm fighting for, and here's why this guy is actually just fighting for his rich donors and his friends and to keep himself out of prison.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk. Just if we could go blow by blow in terms of the issues that they're likely to tackle. First and foremost, Trump has been talking about the border. He's been talking about migrant UFC fights over the weekend. Immigration is something Republicans feel like they have Democrats in a corner on. And if you're Biden and you're talking to him behind the scenes at the debate, what is the strategy for talking about the broken deal that Trump ruined on the border and also, defending the policy that he just launched?
Yeah, I think if it comes to him, the border first, Biden can easily say, look, I just took an executive action on the border, and I had to do that because we had a deal that would have been better, and there was a bipartisan deal in Congress. This guy told Republicans to kill the deal because he wanted the issue to run on, because for him it's all about politics. And I just made sure that families can stay together, especially spouses, undocumented spouses of American citizens who've been in this country for 10 years. And the difference is he ripped families apart when he was president. I want to keep families together.
I feel like saying child separations over and over and over again is the rejoinder any Democrat needs to use, and specifically this Democrat, right?
Absolutely. But I also think he has to recognize that a lot of people feel like there is a problem at the border, and that everyone across all demographics in both parties, they are concerned about disorder and chaos at the border, and they just want a system that's regularized and that works. And the problem is Congress not passing a law that could take care of it in its totality, but he needs to make that case.
I guess one of the things I worry about, and as you talk about holding together the Democratic coalition, though, is and this is a careful balance, right? Acknowledging the chaos at the border while also not dehumanizing the people who are looking for a better tomorrow, who in many ways, Jon, form the backbone of the American economy. And I wonder if you think there's any peril in playing too much, I guess I'll call it hardball, on the topic of migrants coming over the border.
I've been spending a lot of time for another podcast we do, The Wilderness, focus groups of Latino voters.
Yeah.
And one thing that gets conflated is people talk about immigration, and a lot of voters actually see the border as separate from immigration, including Latino voters. And for a lot of these voters, the border is an issue of public safety. And so they're saying, okay, new arrivals, we want people to come into this country, but we want it to be orderly. We need a border. But then people who have been in this country for years, who may be undocumented, people are much more welcoming of those. So I think you have to separate out what's going on at the border and say, yes, we are going to be tough on the border. We're going to have a secure border. That's important. We don't want chaos. But if you've been here for years and you've been working hard and you're law-abiding and you don't have a criminal record, like, we want you in this country. We want to give you a path to citizenship.
Okay,
and I think you just
separating the two and making it a distinction. Even though in theory, I'll just point out the people that are coming over and undocumented now and working to support the U.S. economy in 10 years could be those same people, but I digress.
Sure.
That is a level of nuance that this debate is not going to be able to tolerate. On abortion, Tommy, you know, I know you guys have talked about this on Pod Save America this week, but Trump's going to push this to the states, as he has repeatedly when asked what his policy on abortion is. And my question is, both for Democrats and Republicans in swing states who feel like, okay, it's really bad in a place like Alabama, it's bad in the Deep South, but is it really ever going to get bad in my state? I mean, how do you create a sense of urgency if you're Joe Biden around that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to tell the story of Donald Trump's election and the people he put on the Supreme Court and how it led to this outcome, but then also talk about what their plan is to do next. I mean, they are going to push for a federal abortion ban. Full stop. It's going to happen. They're going to push for limits on IVF. They're talking about getting rid of contraception. I mean, there is a radical right-wing base that comes along with Donald Trump. There are a bunch of weirdos that you don't want in your bedroom. And I think he has to tell that broader story, because there's a lot of people that don't view Trump as someone who they think is sort of socially conservative. But in fact, his entire party is.
Well, if he's not socially conservative, it's about making him seem like he just doesn't care what happens to families who are trying to exercise control over bodily autonomy.
And I'm sure Donald Trump's going to be up there and say, there's not going to be a national abortion ban if I'm president. It's like, okay, do you want to trust the guy who last time said abortion's not on the ballot last time we debated? And then now we have abortion bans. 1 in 3 women in the country live under abortion bans. You're going to trust this guy when he says he's not going to do a federal abortion ban, when all of the people he wants to staff his administration with are pushing very hard for not even a legislative ban, for him to take action on his own to ban birth control and abortion across the country? Like, I don't think people want to trust that.
Do you think the support, we're in a week where we're waiting for several landmark decisions from the court. And I kind of wonder, Tommy, whether, I mean, traditionally the Supreme Court gets a certain group of the electorate exercised, whether it's right-wing conservatives or whether it's, you know, court-watching Democrats who understand the dynamics of the court. Do you think it carries more weight in a moment like this? I mean, we're going to have decisions tomorrow night on as going into this debate. And I wonder if you think that that's an arrow in Biden's quiver. Yeah,
I mean, I think you have a moment when a lot of people are paying attention to this debate and a lot of important things are going to happen at the court. And you can make that case in that moment and seize on that opportunity to bring some attention to the power of the court and the opportunity that Donald Trump will have to name, like, the most right-wing 32-year-old he can find to the courts for the next 4 years and just completely stack the deck against us. So, yeah, I do think it's an important case to be made.
It's a weird position for an institutionalist like Biden to bring up any of the nefarious, questionable activities, the extracurricular activities of people like Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas. But certainly the sort of partisan makeup of the bench is fair game if you're talking about what happens in the next 4 years. Tommy, John, and Tommy, the economy, right? This is the most, I think, tricky terrain for Biden, right? This goes back to your first answer where it's like the fight, what is it? The work continues,
finish the job.
Finish the job.
Finish the job.
It's the Patriots.
And sure, it's Super Bowl 79.
Yes.
He has, like, I think the thing that's frustrating to Democrats and progressives is the amount of economic populism Biden has put into action, whether it's capping insulin prices, whether it's taking on large corporations, banning junk fees, taking on Live Nation, being the first president to walk the picket line. I do wonder whether he's going to really be able to talk about any of that tonight, because so much of his posture already feels like it's on the back foot, right? With Trump and the inflation message resonates to an eerie degree among the American public.
Yeah, and that's why I think he can't spend a ton of time talking about what he's accomplished, even though he has accomplished a lot. He can say, when I got into office, because of the pandemic, inflation spiked all over the world. It's come down faster here than anywhere else. But you know what? People were dealing with high costs before the pandemic.
Yeah.
People have been dealing with high costs for decades. And right now, housing is too expensive and healthcare is too expensive. And so I am working every single day to bring those costs down. We've got some done, but we need to do a lot more. Last time Donald Trump was in office, he gave a corporate tax cut to rich people. He wants to do another one. Do we think that that's going to be the best move for the middle class in this country? That's the choice in the election.
I mean, that must be so frustrating for a president, though, I have to say, right? Ron Klain going out there and saying, stop talking about bridges. What is it? Biden spending too much time praising bridges that are being built instead of connecting with voters. I mean, I'm sure Ron Klain is telling Joe Biden that right now. He's helping with debate prep.
Barack Obama, in the first answer of the debate against Mitt Romney, when he lost that debate, instead of hitting Mitt Romney on his tax plan, which the moderator set him up to do, he started talking about his achievements on Race to the Top and education. And I remember, I was just watching the clip the other day, and I remember all of us backstage were just like, oh no. And Ron told him, like, be careful about doing that, you know?
Because that's what he's been spending his time on, and it matters. Yeah. I do wonder, there's this famous piece of sound of Ronald Reagan in 1984 addressing his age. Can we play it? Do we have time? Let's play it.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
First of all, like the Wayback Machine, that was it. That was shut down the age speculation, right? And it's almost impossible to imagine there's going to be any one thing Biden can say. But I do wonder how you think he should, broach it, and whether he should go on offense about it first.
Yeah, I mean, it is remarkable that like a okay zinger by a literal trained actor shut down a debate about his age.
Right.
Anyway, but I think for Biden,
we continue to play it to this day. Anyway.
It's incredible. But I mean, Biden, it's going to be more how he looks, his energy, how he sounds, whether he's punchy, whether he finishes his thoughts instead of cutting himself off. I mean, a lot of this is just performance. It's theater camp for politicians, and hopefully, they're practicing these things. He's going to get them up and energized and rested, and that's the best bet.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.